Every civilization tried to understand what it means to truly see. Only one symbol claimed it had the answer, and it survived 5,000 years to tell us why. The Eye of Horus. Most people know the symbol, but almost no one knows what it actually contains. Behind it lies a mathematical code, an anatomical blueprint, and a story about consciousness itself. By the end of this video, you'll understand why this eye never blinks, and what it's truly been trying to show us all along. Because the Eye of Horus was never watching. It was remembering what humanity forgot to see. If you're drawn to the symbols that shaped our consciousness, subscribe. This is beyond mythology. The story begins with violence. Horus, the falcon-headed god, rightful heir to the throne of Egypt, Set, his uncle, god of chaos and the desert storm, the one who murdered Horus's father, Osiris, and scattered his body across the Nile. This wasn't a political dispute, it was cosmic war. You see, to the Egyptians, this wasn't just a family feud between gods. Set wasn't simply a villain, he was the embodiment of everything that breaks vision apart. He ruled the desert, the place where direction disappears, where horizons blur, where the sun blinds instead of illuminating. He was the roar of the sandstorm that erases every landmark. Set represented the kind of chaos that makes you lose your sense of self. And Horus, the falcon god of the sky, the one who sees everything from above, a symbol of perspective, clarity, and rightful order. Their battle wasn't about domination. It was about which state of consciousness would rule the world, the one that sees clearly from above or the one lost in the storm. The battle raged across Egypt, sky against storm, order against entropy. And in one brutal moment, Set reached up and tore out Horus's left eye, shattering it into 6 pieces. The god of divine vision, blinded. But here's where the myth transcends the battlefield. Thoth, god of wisdom, magic, and the moon, gathered the shattered fragments. He restored the eye, made it whole again, but not the same. Something transformed in that restoration. The eye that returned wasn't just healed, it became the Wadjet, the complete one. And this is where many modern eyes miss the point. Egyptian symbols weren't illustrations, they were technologies of meaning. Priests believed that every glyph carried a fragment of the universe inside it. A symbol wasn't drawn to represent something, it was drawn to participate in that thing. This means the Eye of Horus wasn't a drawing of restoration, it was restoration encoded. To read a symbol in Egypt was to activate its pattern inside yourself. That's why the Wadjet became more than a mythic organ returned to a god. It became a blueprint, a diagram, a map for how the human mind reassembles itself after fracture. And in Egyptian thought, this wasn't a happy ending where everything goes back to normal. This was an initiation, a passage through loss into consciousness. The eye didn't become sacred because it was powerful. It became sacred because it was wounded, shattered, and then made whole. When you look at the Eye of Horus, you're not looking at a drawing, you're looking at mathematics. Each part of the eye represents a fraction, the right side, 1/2, the pupil, 1/4, the eyebrow, 1/8, the left side, 1/16, the curved tail, 1/32, the teardrop, 1/64. Add them all up, 63 out of 64, not complete. This wasn't a mistake. The Egyptians were exceptional mathematicians. They knew exactly what they were doing. That missing 64th? That was Thoth's magic, the piece that only the divine could provide. The gap between human perception and cosmic truth. They were saying something profound. Wholeness doesn't come from perfection. It's born through restoration, through something sacred, filling the space where fracture once lived. This is Ma'at, the Egyptian principle of cosmic order. Not rigid perfection, but dynamic balance. The universe as an eternal act of becoming whole. The Eye of Horus is the formula for that becoming. And here's where it gets even more fascinating. Those fractions weren't exclusive to the eye. They appear in measurements of offerings, grains, medical recipes, and even in temple architecture. To the Egyptians, mathematics wasn't abstract. It was ritual. Numbers were a way of aligning human action with cosmic balance. A priest measuring incense in 64th parts wasn't simply being precise, he was reenacting the restoration of the eye. Every fraction carried meaning. 1/2, the world as it seems; 1/4, the world as it feels; 1/8, the world as it's remembered; 1/16, the world as it's forgotten; and the missing 1/64th? That was the part only the gods could complete. Mathematics wasn't about calculation, it was about humility, a reminder that no matter how much we understand, there's always a piece beyond us, waiting to be restored. And if you think that's where the mystery ends, look closer. Modern researchers noticed something staggering when they compared the symbol to human brain anatomy. The eyebrow maps to the frontal lobe, thought and judgment. The eye itself, the thalamus and hypothalamus, the processing centers of sensory perception. That curved tail descending downward, the brain stem and spinal cord connecting mind to body. The teardrop, positioned where the olfactory bulb sits, scent and primal memory. Now, we don't have proof that the Egyptians performed brain dissections and mapped neural structures, but we know this: they were obsessed with the relationship between the physical body and the eternal self. They mummified organs with ritual precision. They understood that consciousness required a vessel. So whether this anatomical connection was scientific knowledge or symbolic intuition, the result is the same. The Eye of Horus isn't just a symbol about perception, it is the architecture of perception. Body, mind, spirit, all synthesized into one glyph. What makes this even more intriguing is a paradox buried in Egyptian ritual. They discarded the brain during mummification. To us, that sounds absurd. The brain is the seat of consciousness. But the Egyptians believed consciousness wasn't trapped in a single organ. It was a network: heart, breath, memory, name, shadow. And yet, the Eye of Horus maps almost perfectly onto the brain's internal structures. This suggests something powerful. They may not have studied the brain anatomically, but they intuitively understood how perception worked. They treated consciousness spiritually and symbolized it anatomically. In their world, symbol and body weren't separate. They spoke the same language. They didn't separate the material from the mystical. They encoded the mystical into the material. But there's another layer that changes everything. Horus had two eyes. The right eye was the eye of Ra, the sun, burning, active, revealing. The eye of logic and the manifest world. The left eye, the one torn out and restored, was the lunar eye. The eye of Thoth, reflective, cyclical, intuitive. The eye that perceives what sunlight cannot reach. And this distinction matters because it tells us which eye became the symbol of protection, not the solar eye of dominance, the lunar eye of wisdom. The Egyptians understood something we've lost. True perception requires both reason and instinct, analysis and mystery, the light that reveals and the shadow that gives depth. To see with only the sun is to be consumed by certainty. To see with only the moon is to drown in ambiguity. But to see with both, that's divine vision. That's why the wounded eye, the lunar eye, became sacred, because protection doesn't come from invulnerability. It comes from integration, from holding opposing forces in balance. When Set tore out that lunar eye, he didn't just wound Horus, he fractured the equilibrium between knowing and being. Thoth's restoration wasn't medical, it was cosmic surgery. He gave back the ability to perceive meaning, not just matter. The Egyptians placed the Eye of Horus everywhere, painted on coffins, carved into temple doorways, worn by sailors crossing the Mediterranean, by soldiers marching into Nubia, by mothers giving birth, by scribes learning sacred texts. But the eye wasn't used as a charm for luck. It was a formula, a remembrance, a sacred technology. When painted on tomb walls, it became a guide, a map for the soul's journey through the afterlife. The Book of the Dead describes the deceased needing to perceive clearly in the realm beyond death, to recognize truth from illusion, to navigate the halls of judgment. The eye ensured the soul wouldn't be blind in the dark. In temple rituals, priests performed a ceremony called the opening of the eyes. Statues of gods and pharaohs were touched with special tools to give them sight, to activate consciousness within stone. And when a sarcophagus bore the Eye of Horus, the paint did more than adorn the wood. It echoed the ritual that awakened perception beyond death. You weren't just giving the dead an amulet. You were giving them vision, the ability to reawaken awareness in the next world, to walk through the duat, the realm of the dead. The soul needed more than courage. It needed perception. The eye was the gateway. When a sailor wore it on a ship, he wasn't asking for fair winds. He was aligning with the principle of restored perception, the ability to navigate through chaos by inner vision. Protection in Egyptian thought wasn't a shield, it was memory. To be protected was to remember who you are, even when the world tries to shatter you. The Eye of Horus said, "You've been broken before, you were made whole before." The pattern repeats. And then the symbol migrated, from Egypt to Greece, from mystery cults to hermetic traditions, from sacred temples to Masonic lodges, from spiritual iconography to the back of the dollar bill, the eye of providence, the all-seeing eye. But something changed along the way. What began as a symbol of inner perception became a symbol of external surveillance. The eye that restores became the eye that monitors. The tool of initiation became the icon of control. This is what happens when symbols are borrowed without their mythology. The form remains, the meaning inverts. But here's the thing about archetypal symbols. They carry memory. Even when distorted, even when commodified, they hold a trace of their origin, and that trace is stirring again. As centuries passed, the eye didn't fade. It migrated, not as a doctrine, not as a philosophy, but as a memory woven into different cultures. In Greece, it resurfaced as the symbol of inner vision, not something seen with the eyes, but something recognized with the mind. In Rome, it became a sign of augury and insight, a reminder that perception was a sacred act, not a mechanical one. In later mystical traditions, the eye appeared again, not because people copied Egypt, but because certain symbols refuse to die. They re-emerge wherever humans search for meaning. And that's the strange thing about the Eye of Horus. It never needed a priesthood to preserve it. It traveled quietly, carried by the simple idea that humans are meant to see more than the surface. Cultures changed, empires collapsed, but the symbol survived, because everywhere it went, people recognized the same truth. That sight is not just biological, it's spiritual. And symbols that speak to the spirit tend to outlive the civilizations that first carved them. We live in an age of eyes, cameras on every corner, screens in every hand. We see everything, yet we understand nothing. The Eye of Horus is speaking again, not from temples, but from the echo in our collective unconscious. It's asking, what would it mean to reclaim perception in an age of noise? What would it mean to restore the lunar eye in a world drunk on solar certainty? Let's return to the myth. Horus loses his eye in battle. It's shattered into pieces. Thoth restores it, and then Horus does something unexpected. He gives the eye to his father, Osiris, the murdered god, lying in the underworld. He offers his own restored vision to resurrect the dead. This is the pattern encoded in the symbol: fragmentation, restoration, and offering. You don't heal just to be whole. You heal to give sight to what's been lost. This is the part of the myth few remember, but it's the most important, because it tells us that wholeness isn't the end. It's the beginning of something else. The eye you restore isn't just for you. It's for the world that's forgotten how to see. The Eye of Horus teaches that you cannot perceive truly until you've known blindness. You cannot protect what you haven't first lost. You cannot integrate what you've never allowed to break. The eye isn't passive. Perception is an act. It demands intention, the courage to look into the dark and recognize what lives there. The Egyptians knew this. That's why the symbol of protection was an eye, not a shield, not a wall, not a weapon. Because real protection doesn't come from defense, it comes from clarity. When you perceive clearly, shadows don't terrify you. When you remember your pattern, fracture doesn't destroy you. When you balance sun and moon, certainty and mystery, logic and instinct, you become something chaos cannot fragment. Not because you're invulnerable, but because you understand the cycle. Fall, gather, restore, offer. This is Ma'at. This is the eye that never closes, not watching from above, but moving through the world, turning blindness into perception. Modern neuroscience says something the Egyptians already knew. We don't see with our eyes, we see with our attention. And attention is selective, painfully selective. Experiments show people can stare directly at something and never perceive it, simply because their mind isn't prepared to see. It's called inattentional blindness, a blindness not of the eye, but of the self. And that's the shadow the Eye of Horus asks us to confront, not the darkness outside, but the blind spots we carry within. When the Egyptians spoke of restoring the eye, they weren't talking about vision. They were talking about awakening. The Eye of Horus survived 5,000 years because it speaks to something eternal. We all lose our lunar eye. We all fracture under the weight of chaos, through loss, betrayal, or simply the erosion of living in a world that forgot the sacred. And the symbol says this is not failure, this is initiation. The fracture is the doorway, the gathering is the work, the restoration is the return. And when you finally perceive again, truly with both sun and moon with both eyes open, you realize something. The Eye of Horus endures not because it watches us, but because it remembers what we forgot to see. That we were never meant to be unbroken, only to remember that wholeness begins where fracture ends,